Right, here's a practical guide, Year 12, to how to put a magazine cover together. It has taken some time to do, but I think this sums up very well all the little pitfalls, but all of the essential tools of Photoshop. Let's go. So we're going to be doing this in real time, and we're going to set ourselves up this magazine cover, and we're going to do it much like a kind of fashion magazine at the moment. Obviously you guys are doing current affairs magazines, but in very broad strokes we're going to get the conventions of a magazine in place, in the most horrendous colours possible, and then at least you'll have the basics of the tools you need, and you'll have definitely covered the main conventions that you need in terms of things like mastheads and cell lines, and even things like barcodes. So before we start anything with Photoshop, let's make sure that we have our workspace organized. What we do not want to have is our desktop full of all kinds of stuff and we can't navigate it, because we are going to end up eventually in any still image project having bits and pieces of images coming in. So if we go over here to the right hand side of my screen, you can hopefully see that I've set myself up a new folder here. This is called, in my case, Magazine Home Project All, and I would suggest that you do the same thing yourself, because in that way you can have a place where everything's going to be. So let's go and open Photoshop. So I'm going to go down here to my copy of Photoshop CS5. You may well have a more recent version on your Office 365 accounts that we sort of set you up during the COVID-19 crisis. But either way, all the main tools are going to be the same, right? It's a bit like Word. It changes over time, but the main stuff is pretty much always going to be in the same place. So here we are with Photoshop loaded up. You might find you've got a splash screen before this, and the first thing we're going to go and do is we're going to go and set ourselves up a new file. So we're going to go to the top left hand corner, File, New. Now we need to set up something that is pretty useful, and we're going to go and call this a useful name. Always name things up properly. So we'll go and call this Trial Fashion Magazine. It could be any kind of magazine. Eventually you guys will do current affairs magazines, but that's not what we're doing here. It certainly will look a bit more bright and bubbly and exciting, whatever I'm going to show you, but that's really to show you nice and clearly visually what the conventions are. Now I'm also going to go down to make this an A4, so I'm going to go to Preset, International Paper, A4, width 210 by 297. That's a standard A4 size, although magazines can be smaller than that, but for you for now that's fine, as long as it's going to be portrait rather than landscape. Resolution is industry standard is 300, but I'm going to put 250 because that will save you a little bit of data size, and you don't need to quite go for industry standard in terms of the resolution of your images. Color mode is RGB 8-bit. That's absolutely fine, but the background contents we want to be transparent, and that will do us just fine, I believe. There we go, and we can press OK. So that gives us a nice A4 looking workspace with that grey and white checkerboard on it. Now that's terribly important, because that tells us there is absolutely nothing in the workspace. And what we're going to do next is we're going to set ourselves up some backgrounds to work with that are going to be useful for us. So the next thing we're going to do is set ourselves up. In fact, before we hit any colours at all, we're going to set up our windows and our views to make sure you've got the right things on the right hand side. So let's have a look. Really, on the left hand side we've got all of our tools, and with this I'm going to give you a bit of a sheet that's got a breakdown of all the most important tools we're going to be using today, highlighted in red. But this is where most of the action happens. In terms of what's at the top, especially on Macs, but you'll find that any of these kind of applications, an awful lot of work happens here at the top with these different drop down menus. We'll have a look at those. And then in terms of assessing color and layers and what's going on with Photoshop, because remember Photoshop isn't like Paint. Paint, you only have essentially one piece of paper that you can sort of keep drawing over and over and over. And what we have with Photoshop is this layering. Imagine a load of clear bags, clear perspex sheets, and you can move those sheets up and down. So you can color something blue on one sheet and something green on another sheet and something red on another, and then you can have green at the front, or you can layer blue at the front, or you could layer the red at the front and put green and blue behind it. So the idea is that you can constantly move layers forward, up and down, and that's what gives Photoshop its power, the ability to have these different layers and therefore be able to manipulate color without messing up the other colors that you've done. So let's go and have a look at our windows. These are the windows that we want to be having up. We definitely want to be having our layers up, and because that's central to this whole layering and the power of Photoshop. We want to have our colors up, and you can see that in the top right hand corner of the screen, and then adjustments, and that will pretty much do it as the absolute necessities of it. The other thing I would say to you definitely to go and have would be to go to View and go to Rulers. Ever so important, and you can start to see a ruler round the edge of the frame. Now once you've got rulers up, it doesn't necessarily, well, you won't necessarily know what type of measurements that you've got there, but if we press Control on that one, and at the moment we've got centimeters, and I would always say to you guys at the moment, centimeters is less than useful to you. I would always put pixels or picture cells, and that gives us a 0 to just under 2000 or so there, and then 0 down to 2800. Now if you've got a magazine cover that's say 2000 by 2800 pixels, that is a large detailed image. That's because we put it at 250 dots per inch. So what you'll have there, when you print this up, it will look tight, it won't look blocky. So that make sure that you put up your pixels rulers quite early on. Just check you've got the right size canvas. One of the biggest problems that some people have is they start on a canvas that they think looks fine on their screen, but it's been set up wrong from the outset, and it's actually only about 300 by 500 pixels or something, and when they go to print it up after a month of working on it, it looks appalling. So it's super important to check you've got the right amount of pixels. A healthy amount of pixels is really 2000 by 2000 or above, but you guys having a portrait magazine cover, 2000 by 2800 is what you should have if you've got an A4 size canvas with it at 250 dpi. So do check that before you start. So let's have a look at actually putting some different color in some different layers on the page. So we have been given down here layer 1, right? They get one free layer, and in future we'll have to make new layers if we want to put new objects on the page. We're going to use layer 1, and the first thing we're going to do with layer 1 is we're going to double click on that name, and we're going to name our layers. This is super important. Now the first thing I always do with a Photoshop document, doesn't matter what I'm doing, is I always have a horrible green background layer, and as you can see down here I have named it green BG, and that means that I can always know what is on what layer. So I'm always going to give my layers names that correspond to what's on there. So let's go and get some green. So green is going to be down here in our little colors section down here at the bottom left hand side. We could also get our colors from the top right hand corner as well. And I'm going to click on here. We've got the foreground color that's just in front of the background color. So you can see the red is just in front, and that's our foreground color, and that will be the sort of the main color we use if we do any kind of paint brushing or anything. So let's go and double click on that, and I'm going to go and get a really nasty green color. Make it as saturated as possible by dragging it to the top right hand corner of my square, and I'm going to press OK. So now I've got my green color. Now the way we work in Photoshop is that we have to marquee areas. We have to portion off areas and say, I want to work on this bit here on this particular layer or slice. We'll call them layers for now. They are layers. So let's have a look up here at the top left hand corner, and we're going to be using our rectangular marquee tool. Now one thing that's worth talking about very quickly with Photoshop is that you will see along all of these different tools they have this little black triangle in the bottom right hand corner. Now with that, that means that there is other tools that are underneath that tool and very much related to that tool. So you can see with rectangular marquee tool, there's an elliptical marquee tool, there's a single row marquee tool, and you can see that with other ones. So if we just go back there again to over here, let's click on this one. Now, this is the gradient tool, and if I click on the gradient tool, underneath the gradient tool there is the paint bucket tool. In fact, the paint bucket tool is what we're going to use now. But those two tools are there for putting colour in. A paint bucket will put one colour in an area, and a gradient tool will fade between two or more colours to sort of make a nice sort of gradient fade, like a very kind of 80s kind of look. But for now, we're going to go to paint bucket. So with our paint bucket, we've got our green, we've got our paint bucket, and in fact what we need to do is we're going to go and marquee that area. So let's go to marquee, and we're going to grab up the whole of our canvas. Right, so you can see the marching ants kind of look that we've got around the edge. That means that's what's active, and we know that we're going to be down here, and we're going to click on our green background layer. So that's gone like a light blue colour. It might be slightly different on yours, but we know we're working on that layer. We're working on this whole area because we've got the marching ants around it, and then we can go to our paint pot on the left hand side, paint bucket with our green, and click it in, and that will make that particular layer a horrendous colour. Now once we've done that, to get rid of our marching ants and that selection of the area, we're going to go back to our marquee tool in the top left hand corner and do what I call a 0 point click. That is to say, you click once but you grab up no area, and that just says, yeah, I'm done with that area. So now we've got our first background layer there. We can toggle that on and off, and we're going to use this little eye icon down here in the layers, and that just means that the layer is still there, it's just been made invisible. And you can see we've got a transparent layer that says there's absolutely nothing on the desk almost, and then you can put that back in and we've got this horrendous green colour there. Now that's going to be useful when we cut things out, or if you want to see what is truly around the edge of another layer. Because if you say you've got a white cell line on a white background or a white cell line on a black background, then if it's on a black background, you'll be able to see it. If it's on a white background, you won't be able to see it. If it's on a green background, you'll definitely see it. And so that can be really useful to see what have I truly cut out as well. That's very useful for photography editing. So let's make ourselves a new layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some standard kind of conventions in that might be useful. Let's have a start by going to, because we're making a new thing, a new object on the page, we're going to go to layer, new layer. So let's go there and click that, and we're going to go and call it something useful. And for this one, I'm going to go and call it a banner. Right? Very often magazines have banners like a top bar at the top where they are sort of a different colour, and I'm going to make this a rather horrendous red colour, and with that I'm named it banner. It's one layer up from the green layer, so we know it's going to be the next thing that we're going to be able to go and see, and we're going to go and marquee an area. Right now there's two ways of making shapes, but I tend to like it doing it this way. But there is a shape tool as well, and I can show you that next time round. So let's grab up the area that we know we want to have the banner in, and then we're going to marquee that up. We're going to go to our red colour there, just make sure we've got that, and then we're going to go to our paint bucket, and then we're going to go to fill our marqueed area. And then once I do a 0 point click again, just go up to the marquee tool, click once, and you'll see that I've now got a nice clean red banner at the top. Now we have our red banner, we can hopefully see we've got two different layers, and if I drag that down, you'll see that that layer will now disappear because it's one layer beneath the full green background that we've got, and we can push it back up again, and then we can see our red layer. So if it's not obscured, you can see it, and therein lies the power of Photoshop, that ability to layer very separate objects within a composition on a page. Now let's go and get another layer because we've got a new thing to make. Layer, new layer, and now I'm going to go and call this one a splash because that's what it's going to be. And a splash tends to be somewhat of a dot or some kind of star on the page. I'm going to use a dot, And actually a useful thing can be found here in that we're going to not use a rectangular marquee, we're going to use an elliptical marquee. Now the way we're going to do that to find our new tools that are just beneath that tool there, I'm going to press Control and click, and you'll see that my rectangular tool is at the top, but my elliptical marquee tool is just beneath it. Now I'm going to make this a separate colour so we can clearly see what I've done, and let's go and click on our red in the bottom left hand corner. Let's just make this a horrendous blue colour. There we go. And here's a rather interesting thing we need to do. Instead of just doing a grab up of an area like that, and you see at the moment I've made an elliptical marquee, but it looks a bit like a rugby ball, and it's no good to us right now because most splashes aren't oval, they're circular, right? So what we need to do is we need to hold shift as we drag. Now if you hold shift as you do in marquee, it will stay in proportion, it will be as horizontal as it is vertical, so you'll get a nice ball shape. And with that ball shape, we can then fill that with blue, as we're going to do now. So let's go and let go of that one. Make sure you let go of the click before you let go of the shift, otherwise it will go out to the oval, and that's going to be really annoying for you. So hold the shift down, it will trim it into a circle, and then you can go and use that. So if I let go of my click, and then it's going to give me this nice marching ants in a ball kind of shape. And I can go across to my paint bucket. I've got my blue already, and I'm going to go and fill that. There we go. Now I can also do the same thing I was doing before, which is to go and do a 0-point click, clicking like that, and then the marching ants will go away. And then I'll use my move tool. If in doubt, go back to your move tool, which is at the very top of that left hand bar. And the reason why it's at the very top is because it's very important and something you'll do an awful lot. We haven't had to move anything yet, but we're moving stuff now. So let's go to our move tool, and that means I can get whatever has been placed on that layer and I can move it around. And that means you can also see the preview of it down there as well. So let's go and pop that up in the corner, for example. That'll do just fine. Right, so let's have a look at what we can do now. So we can see that we've got our 3 layers, and we can move those around, and you can see that our blue circle has now become a semicircle as it hides behind the banner. So we've got our layering all working. Let's go and make ourselves some text on the page, because what's important is that you have the right conventions, and a lot of those conventions on a magazine front cover are to do with the text. So let's go across to the left here, which is the standard horizontal type tool. And one thing that's important with type tools is that you don't need to go and make a new layer before you type. It will make a layer for you. Okay, so let's go to that tool, and then we're going to grab up an area that is bigger than the text we are going to write into it. Okay, now this is an important thing about Photoshop, is that it's not PowerPoint. A PowerPoint will always get the box and push the box out depending on how much you type. So if I go and type the word in masthead, and at the moment it's tiny, right? It's only a 14-point font, as you can see up here at the top, and we can make that a bit bigger by making that a 72-point font. With a masthead, you're going to find that you're going to have to type a new value in there. Okay, so you can type in a value, you don't have to put just the standard values they give you in the drop down menu. So let's go up to 140 and see what happens. Oh, look what's happened. Our masthead has been horrendously cut off by the size of the text box around it. Not like PowerPoint. So what we're going to have to go and do now is, we've got 2 options here. We can go and change the size of our font slightly. Let's go and pump that down to 120, but it's still too big. So we're going to make that a bit larger, make that box a bit larger, and you can start to see that it has got that masthead letter information in there, but it's only showing so much of it. And I'm going to go back to my move tool and drag it back in, and you will find that it's going to be, mastheads are that big, right? Mastheads really are very huge sizes. Now at the moment we've got 2 problems. First of all, it's just maybe a bit too big because it's getting right to the edge of the page. Nothing on a magazine in terms of written words should be really touching the exact edge of the page. It's a very poor sort of design detailing, and also it's the wrong colour. It's the same colour as the splash and won't stand out. So what we can do is we can go back into that masthead, and the best way to do that is go to the type tool on the left hand side, and you're going to get that cursor, that kind of T, an upside down T kind of line, and we're going to click between two letters on that layer. Now we know we're on that layer because that layer has been created there in the bottom right hand corner. We're going to click between, say, the T and the H, and that will reselect that layer for us. If you start clicking in other places on the page, it won't pick it up, and it might even make a new text layer for you, and then you'll find it's called something like layer 1 or layer 2 in the bottom right hand corner, and you'll go, why have I got all these sort of baggy layers with nothing in? So make sure you click between two letters that you know exist on the layer in the bottom right hand corner that you know exists, and we're going to grab that up like so, and then I can go to the top and I can change the color of it, and I'm going to go and change it to a horrendous orange color for now. And let's see what we've got. If we go and do a 0 point click, I sometimes go back to the marquee tool and just click that once, and then I sort of see what we've got. Now this looks horrendous, but it's definitely a masthead, a splash, and a banner. Now a little thing that we can do to help rescue this is we're going to click on our masthead layer, and instead of me moving the masthead a great deal, because we don't want, see how that D is touching the right hand side, we don't want that. So we could just try and move that masthead around, but we've got such fine margins that we might decide that we want to just move it away from the edge or make it a bit sort of more symmetrical. So rather than use the move tool in the top left hand corner, which is a bit coarse, it's a bit too big, and you see how sometimes it snaps against things and you don't want it to and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the cursor keys. If you want to move something very finely, maybe just literally a pixel to the left and a pixel to the right, you can use left and right to go and move the text ever so slightly. Now I'm going to go and move that a bit further down. We need to have our masthead in the top third, and we need it to be symmetrical. I think that's about right there, but we've used the cursor keys to make it more symmetrical. So the next things we're going to go and do is we're going to put on our cell lines, and we're going to put our main cell line on there as well. Now each of these things should ideally be treated as a separate object. So we're going to go in and we're going to go to the left hand side, go to our text box, and I'm going to grab up a nice big area because my cell lines are going to be rather large, and I've still got the hangover from last time I did my masthead, which is my 120 point font size. Now I'm going to change that to something a bit more reasonable, maybe around 60 points. Let's see how we go with that one, and we're going to go and click back into our box, and you can see we've got our justification tools here as well. You can see it's centered at the moment from whenever I last used it. Now you can have it justified right or justified left, and I'm going to sort of be a bit happier having it justified left from now on. So we're going to go and call this one main cell line, and it really is just about setting ourselves up a template. We can go back and we can type in different words by using our cursor between two letters afterwards, and we're going to have our main cell line there, and then we're going to just click onto the move tool to make sure we're sort of finished with that, and you'll see that that has made a layer called main cell line there, and we can sort of move that where we want to for later on. I'm going to go to T for text and grab another one, and I'm going to go and call this main cell line subline. I never know what they're called, but what we do know is that that has cut it off because the font is bigger than the size of the text box that we are writing in. So we're going to go back, we're going to grab up that area with our cursor, and we're going to make that a far smaller font, and that's something they quite often do with main cell lines. Now that's too small, let's go and stick that up to about 48. Too big, let's go and stick that up at 24, something that's sort of working with it. So we're going to click on the move tool. Now move tool is very often considered almost like a reset. It clicks you out of things, it gets you out of marquees, and now we've got two lines, the main cell line and the main cell line sort of subline, and we can, if you want, hold shift in the bottom right hand corner and see how that holding of shift, which is that kind of up arrow that's just above sort of function and control on the far left of the keyboard, and then we can press control, and then what we're going to go and do is we're going to link those layers. Right now that means that those two, and they can be unlinked afterwards, they've got that little chain icon next to them. If I go to the move tool now, just to be sure, look, they will move round together for always, so they will be linked spatially with each other. Now that's really useful, otherwise you sort of have to move one and then move the other. The next thing that we can do is we're going to go to another T for text, and we're going to go and get some of our smaller cell lines, and I'm going to go back and maybe we'll make this the same size as our sublines there as well. One thing about cell lines is they shouldn't be too big and they shouldn't be too small, but they will tend to be smaller than you realize, because you've got a small image here on the screen. This is meant to be A4 sized, so even if it looks small on your desktop, it won't look small when you print it out. Now, a neat little trick that you can have with cell lines is sort of by bunching them up. You can have them as individuals, and sometimes you can bunch them up. For now, I'm going to take the quick and easy path of the dark side and go cell line, space, cell line, space, cell line. And it might be something that I know is going to sort of justify left on my page. It might be that I have this as separate cell lines in separate text box layers. But what this allows me to do is get a real sense of symmetry and a sense of layout when I'm doing this. In fact, what you can do is you can start to put like little line markers between cell lines. That's a very common device that they use. Let's go and get that. Click on the move tool in the top left hand corner. So I've got my little bunch of cell lines here. I've got my main cell line linked to my subline there at the bottom. Let's just go move that to one side. There we go. Look, I'll click that up. Both of them have the chain link, and I'll move that up there. And then I'm probably going to go and need some banner cell lines as well, which I'll not waste your time in doing. And I'll put those there for the next part of our exercise. Here's something I prepared earlier. We have added some cell lines to save a little bit of time. Now, we've put some cell lines up there in our banner in yellow there, and there's normally a couple of things up there in terms of cell lines, and we've put some intriguing splash text in our blue ball. Now, that's sort of the amount of cell lines that you might expect to see in a fashion magazine. But that should give you an idea of what you're going to be looking at. It depends on the magazine. Fashion magazines tend to have more cell lines than current affairs magazines, but at least you get an idea that this is where we're going with it. What is important is that we have our strapline confirming masthead underneath our masthead. That is one of the requirements of the NEA, so you're going to need to have that in there. Now, this actually made me think of another common problem that students have, which is that if I want to go and put a date and issue number in there, which is again one of the sort of minimum requirements of the NEA, I'm going to go and get a text box, and I'm going to think, oh, I'm just going to put the date and the issue number just underneath. Oh dear, I've just gone and selected my masthead, right? I've selected my masthead text accidentally by putting where that text for the date and whatnot should be too close to it, and it selected the whole text box. So here's a thing that you should do as sort of a rule of thumb, and that is make some text away from the other text and then put it in place. Otherwise you run the risk of selecting text you don't want to, or making excess text layers. So I'm going to go back to the move tool over here in the top left hand corner to kind of reset where I'm at. Then I go T for text, and I'm going to go and use this space here, this dead space over here, and put my text in. And I know that this is going to be small text for the date and issue number, so let's go and go to really small text. I'm going to make it like size 10, and then it will barely turn up and register on the page. So I might go and say it is, let's have a look, June 2020, and I'm going to make that its own layer there. I might want to go and have the price next to that, but actually let's go and just do that as its own separate layer. And you see it's absolutely tiny. Now this takes me on to another thing. And that other thing is zooming, and zooming is going to be super important on your project, because there's going to be points where you're going to really want to see what's happening between a few pixels. Now at the moment I've got my tiny little date text box here, and I can move that around, but it's too small to really see because it's so small. So what I'm going to use the following. If you go to the top, you've got view. If you do it the old-fashioned way with the drop-down menu, you've got zoom in and zoom out under view, and as you can see, you've got the apple, or as it says here, it's like the command, I believe it's called command, but the curly whirly, as I often call it, the curly whirly plus and the curly whirly minus. And that's very often for using, for zooming on all kind of Mac kind of stuff. Now, if I go to curly whirly plus, then I will zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in all kinds of detail. Now actually you should see just how detailed our image is. We've zoomed in really very closely and we haven't got any blockiness whatsoever, and this is what I'm saying about having that very high dots per inch. Now I'm going to go to my move tool in the top left hand corner, and I'm going to go and move my date just up there like so for now. In fact, what I am going to do is go in and just go and change the color. So I'm going to go to T for text, click between two letters, select it up, and then I'm going to make that a horrendous yellow. Now you understand that I would never ever have a magazine here that looks this garish, but it's just to show you where things go and so we can get used to changing colors. I would expect your magazine to have maybe no more than 4 colors on the page against your image. Right, so let's go and zoom out. I'm going to use Command minus, and we're going to get out to our whole A4 side of magazine cover. Now, what are we missing? We are definitely going to be missing a price. Very often that's near the barcode, and I'll put that in a bit. Let's go and get ourselves a barcode. No, you need to have original images throughout the entirety of your A-level coursework. I'm going to take the liberty of going and get myself an image later on that I will have purloined from the internet, just to show you how you might make a decent composition for a magazine. But you must, and I repeat, you must go and get original images. The only thing that doesn't have to be original is the barcode, because that would be the most boring task of all time. So let's go and get ourselves a barcode and bring it in to our magazine. Let's go to Google and we're going to type in the following: barcode JPEG. The most common and most useful types of standard images that you'll get from the internet will be JPEGs. There's other file types in the world, things like PNGs. They have their uses because PNGs have transparencies. Bitmaps are also good, but they tend to be very data intensive but higher quality. So there's different file types. But JPEG is the most useful sort of currency that we have on the internet. So we go to barcode JPEG, that's giving us quite a few, and we're going to go to images, and with any luck these are in fact JPEGs, and we're going to go and grab that one there. Look, ISN JPEG. And now if you've got a Windows computer, you might have to do like a right click, file save as. With this, with any luck, I should just be able to drag off. That's done it as a PNG. If I click on that one, will it give me it as a JPEG? There you go. So you see the difference. If you go and click on the image first in Google Images, it'll take you through to the larger full whack version of it, and then you go and get that one. But if you just take it straight from Google, when it's giving it all the sort of menu system over here of showing you all your options, you'll only get it as a PNG, and it will tend to be a smaller size of pixels as well. So go and get the full whack thing. Let me go and minimize my window there. Now here's where your sort of desktop tidying up becomes very important. We know that that one there is too small. It's the PNG version. Let's get rid of that, and then let's go and rename this one here on the left hand side. Let's go and double click that one slightly, and we're going to call that one barcode best. Right, so we know it's the best one, and we're going to go and put that in our magazine home project all. And every time we go and get a new image in, maybe it's one of your original images, some of your photography, or maybe it's just a barcode, but it's going to go in here, and all the assets are going to sit in magazine home project all. And when you get to school, it's going to be magazine coursework all, or something, whatever I give you the name to do. So in order to get the image in, there are 2 ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you the kind of quickest way, but there's a very important thing you have to do afterwards, which from the quickest way. Now the quickest way, you guys will be like, oh, I'll just drag it in, like everything I've ever done in a tablet, for example. So let's go across to magazine home project all, where everything is stashed, and I'm going to go and get my barcode best, and I'm going to just drop it in to Photoshop, and it does this thing where it gives you the kind of 8 points of the compass around it, and you can see that it's given it the name barcode best, which is the file name that's in your normal file directories. Now here's an important thing. This gives you an opportunity immediately to get it to the right size that you want. But what you have to do is you have to go and hold shift as you do it and drag from one of the corners, and that will keep it in proportion, exactly like we did before with the ball of the splash, so we didn't make it an oval. So let's go and hold our shift, that little up arrow that's in the bottom left hand corner. You'll have one maybe in the bottom right as well, but I always use one in the bottom left. Let's go and grab that one there, and you can see that we are making it bigger and smaller, but we're keeping the horizontals and verticals in proportion to each other. Now a barcode is not that big. When you see barcodes, you would be surprised how small they are. So I'm going to actually put it about yay big, nearly the size it came in, and I'm going to go and put it there like so. Now it's obviously not where you put a barcode. Now I'm also going to do another little thing which I find quite common with magazines, is that they go and they give it a little bit of a trim. Now the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go and get my barcode layer. Here's an important thing. Do you see that little black marker down there? Right, we need to get rid of that. At the moment, that has brought it in, but it's made it an untouchable so-called smart object, an object that it won't let you edit. So you must, if you want to go and edit it, so we'll say we want to trim a bit off the top of our barcode, we have to press Control and click, and then we have to go to rasterize layer, right? And that will make it no longer a smart layer, it'll just make it a flat rasterized layer of image data, right? Then we can chop bits off it, otherwise you'll get an error message basically saying that you can't do anything to it. So the way to fix that is to press Control on it and go to rasterize layer. If you go and drag things in, you must rasterize it afterwards, otherwise it will be a very dumb smart object. So let's go to our barcode. We're going to drag it across. Maybe for now I'm going to go and pop it in the bottom right hand corner, really out of the way. They really do vary in where they go on the page depending on the composition of the page. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up here to my marquee tools, and I'm going to press Control on my marquee tool to get my rectangular marquee tool. And then I'm going to select up an area. Now I only want to give it like a little bit of a haircut. They tend to have them as oblongs rather than squares, and this is looking a little bit too square for my liking. They really are quite thin. So I'm just going to go and grab up the area there and make it really sort of about the size of a bar of sort of chocolate, definitely longer than it is wide, and just trim that off. So if I'm on that layer in the bottom right hand corner, I've marqueed up an area, but if I want to chop something off, I marquee it up and then I press backspace, and that will trim that right off. So whereas using a marquee is useful for saying I want to fill this area, maybe if I marquee on a layer and then put some paint pot in it, some paint bucket, I can also do the same thing by selecting up part of the image and chopping some off by marking around the bit that I don't want and pressing backspace. So that should look much more, that looks much better. Right, so let's go and show you two more things that are going to help complete at least the very beginnings of a template of your magazine cover. We've got nearly everything there, but I know that I'm going to go and put a model on here in a minute, and the photo that I'm going to use is going to have a white background, which means that my white barcode is going to suddenly die on it. Yeah, it's suddenly going to look like, why are there these random black lines lagging down through the image? So let's go and show you a very, very useful tool. Let's go through in the bottom right hand corner and have a look at the layer that has our barcode on. There it is, barcode best. And the thing that we need to do that is terribly useful is this here, right, the FX tab on our layer. So we're going to click on that and we're going to go to blending options, and this gives us all these kind of options, and you'll see them here, things like drop shadows and inner shadows and outer glows and inner glows, and these are the kind of the most fun things that I like to do in Photoshop. So let's have a look at what we're going to go and do. What we need to go and do is we need to create a stroke. A stroke is an incredibly common thing that they do in magazines. If we click on the stroke there, what that will do is that will create an outline around whatever it is that we have. For example, let's have a look. You should be able to see it on the screen now, but if you can see that there, look, I've got a nice big fat black line around my barcode. but that's 35 pixels in width all the way around, and it gives you all kinds of options as well. It gives you the idea that you can have different colors for that stroke, and that you can have different opacities. Now opacity is about sort of see-throughness, so if I reduce the opacity, you can see that it gets a bit sort of grayer. So we're going to go and make sure that we've got it to black, nice and bold there, and we're going to drop this down in size to about size 4 pixels all the way around the barcode, and that should give us some separation against our white image. And what I'm also going to go and do, and they very often do this as well, is I'm just going to make a very quick text box down here, and I'm going to go and make it very small font, so it's a tiny font size, and I'm going to go and make that the pretty standard kind of price of $5.99. $5.99. There we go. That's quite a lot, you'd think, for a print magazine, but that's because they've got no advertising revenue anymore. So let's go and grab that, and there's $5.99. It's still there. Let's zoom in to just check that we've got it. Let's go and move down here like that. There we are, $5.99, and we will move that one down by going to our Move tool. And a little thing I'm going to show you now, in fact, is rotation. Why not show you rotation? Let's go T for text and grab in the middle of that box and make that just defined to the left, and we're going to go and make it black, really black. So we can always go into any color and drag down to the bottom left or bottom right and totally desaturate it and make it black. Now the reason why I'm showing you this now is why not, but we've got this price, and prices are normally tiny on magazine covers unless it's something sort of aimed at mass market and bargainous like Heat magazine or something like that. Normally they have the price sort of tucked away because they're surprisingly expensive. So we're going to go and get our $5.99 that's down here, and then we're going to rotate it. So we're going to go to edit, and we're going to go to transform. Now we can do rotate like so, and that allows us to rotate it 360 degrees as we see fit. But what we can do here is we can just rotate it by 90 degrees clockwise or anti-clockwise. I've just noticed as I've done my rotation, my $5.99 has gone missing. I wonder where it has gone. Now the best way to go and find something that's missing is to make other layers around it invisible. So if I go like that, maybe it's there. But other than that, I'm going to go and move it. I'm going to go and move it. Maybe it's fallen off the edge of the page. So if I zoom out with my curly whirly or command minus, let's go and have a look at where this might have gone. We always will find at some point during our project that there will be a layer that goes missing. Now I know it's a small $5.99. Let's go and have a look. So I'm going to go for my $5.99 box here on the right hand side, this layer, and I'm going to go to my Move tool, and I'm going to drag. Maybe it's gone off the side of the edge. Let's have a look. There it is. There it is. It was hiding out to one side of the page. So go and get it. We can zoom back in again afterwards. Curly whirly plus. There she is. Hang on, just move down as well. There we go. And we're going to move it back where we want it. Now, a very common device that they use is by getting the price and just tucking it inside the box for the barcode. And what you see there is it's snapped it, right? It sort of wants to sort of put that top of the 5 and top of the 9 right against the black of the stroke that we've just made. There's quite a lot of snapping that goes on. Normally they think it's for your convenience, but actually what we're going to do is we're going to use our cursor keys and just move it down slightly like so. Alright, and then that will give us movement on a pixel by pixel basis, horizontally or vertically, and that's really how they tend to do prices. Now we are near the end because we have most of the conventions on there. Let's just zoom out to see our whole of our magazine cover, and it's very templatey Mr. Tumble look at the moment. It's horrendous, but it is clear and it does have all the conventions on there. So that's a really important thing to be able to go and do. If you don't have all the conventions on there, you will get caned on the mark scheme surprisingly quickly. So make sure you do all these things. In reality, not all magazines have all these things, but the NEA is very prescriptive. But I'm not going to get into the politics of that. What I am going to do is bring in an image, a cover image to go with this. So we're going to go to Google. you guys will have an original image. I was looking at some fashion photography here, and something that's nice and clear, that has some nice clear negative space around it. Now, negative space is when you are looking at where there is not something in the image that they can normally on a magazine cover populate with cell lines, because you don't want a cell line going across a point of interest in the image. So I went and had a look for, let's have a look, I went and found model on white background. I went to tools and I looked for large because I don't want some nasty pixelated image, and I went and found this image here with lots of nice negative space around it and headroom. That's going to be important. We can take shots, we can take photography shots like this in the studio with some nice even lighting. So this is the sort of thing that you might get. Obviously your stuff will be more serious for current affairs, but with this is fine for our fashion magazine. And let's go and grab this, and just to be double sure, I'm going to go and grab that and move that across to here, and then we've got our image. So let's go and grab that across. If you're not sure, then always do a control on the image and do a save image as, but on a Mac you can tend to just drag it to the desktop, as I said before. And I'm going to name it up main cover image, right? And I'm going to put it in my folder, magazine home project all. Drag it there. When you're getting something in, make sure it's named properly, make sure it's all in one place so you're not going to look for it. Now we're going to minimize that window and minimize Google, and what are we going to go and do now? So we're at Photoshop. Let's go to my image in magazine home project all, and I'm going to go and get my image, my main cover image, because I named it up properly, and I'm going to drag it in. Right, it's come in far too small, and we're going to have an image, especially when it's an image of a person, that really does dominate the page. We can talk about the layering of it afterwards, but at the moment we need to get it in at the right size. So we need to going to go to, not going to place the file yet, we're going to press cancel on that first of all, and we are going to go and move it using our move tool. Oh no, that's why. So sometimes if you press the move tool, it gives you this dialog box. I think it's assuming you're going to move it already. So we're going to go and move that there up to the top left hand corner, and this is a good trick. Start by getting it as far to the top left hand corner and then dragging it from the bottom right and holding shift as you do it, because shift allows you to keep things in proportion. Let's hold shift and drag it out and see what we get, right? Because what we can do is we can keep dragging that out, and if we need to go and see more space around the edge to grab these corners, because these are your handles if you will, in order to resize the thing, then we need to move our window out using this little sort of rough looking sort of thumb tag almost in the bottom right hand corner, almost like a grip. So we're going to go and hold shift and we're going to drag that out as far as we can. And we're going to go with that, maybe, yeah, because it tends to be the eyes of whoever's in frame tend to be in the top third of frames. Let's go and grab that, hold shift, hold shift, hold shift. There we go. And at the moment she's a bit out of whack. We need to get her in the center, like so, and we can press return. And at the moment we can see how this might be the appropriate image that we need. But there's a couple of things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to go and make this not a smart object, because a smart object is a dumb object. So we're going to go to press Control, click on the layer, and go to rasterize layer, and that makes it much more editable. The other thing, of course, is we feel like we've lost half of our conventions that are on the page, so we need to go and layer this up. And the good thing to do here is get your main image and drag it down through the layers, and you'll see you get that slightly thicker black line as you drag down, and that says, oh, do you want it here, do you want it here, do you want it there, and then pop it just in front of your green background, and suddenly we're starting to look a bit like a magazine cover. I think we need to start thinking about the layout now. You won't know about your layout until you get your image in. This is why images are absolutely key for what you do. Magazines aren't text with images, it is images with text around it, and your placement is absolutely determined, and your colors actually are also absolutely determined by what's going on with your images in the vast majority of cases, and certainly in the case of having a really tight themed look. for your front covers. So what I'm going to do now is, rather than waste your time doing it all, I'm going to go and do a little bit of a speeding up of the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record my screen and speed it up, and hopefully you'll see some things. But certainly what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the names of these conventions where they are, but I'm going to do some little movements, and I'm going to do some little colour matches as well. Now, interestingly, while we are here, let's go and have a look at colour picking. Where is my colour picker? It is there. It is the eyedropper tool. Right, now that eyedropper tool is really important, because that will help us select colour off the page. Now at the moment I've got that nasty yellow colour over here, and I don't want that because I don't see any yellow colour in my image. So if I go to colour picker and maybe go to one of those buttons, you see how it gives me that sort of slightly soft pinky red colour. You might want another couple of goes at that to maybe get a stronger red colour at some point from that image. Right, see how you get a darker red there. Something that feels comfortable to you, all right, and feels like it truly matches the mood of the image. So I'm going to use that, and actually, just so you know, I'm going to have a look at those colours up there in the top right hand corner. So that will give me the RGB value. Another time when we talk about branding, we'll talk about hexadecimal colours, but for now I know that it's 148, 25, 23, all right, and I'm going to use that red pretty much consistently throughout it, and then I might go and use another colour that I know is pretty strong that's going to work with that. Maybe that may be more of a pink, maybe more of a black in high contrast to that white on the image, to go and move some things around, keep it with a tight colour palette. And I might have to go and move my splashes and my banner slightly up as well, because I can see now that my masthead is really cutting across her eye. On another time I could layer this behind her head, this masthead, but for now I'm just going to bump it up. They do that sometimes. They're not always absolutely clear of their faces when they go and put text around them. Normally you can get away with just being slightly on top of the forehead. So I'm going to go and move some things around now. So you should have seen me do some moving around and using that colour pick that I made from before to change all of the cell lines to a very limited colour palette using her shirt buttons. Now I've stopped it just for a sec because I realised we had a bit of a problem, and that is that we've got our colours of our splash and our banner that aren't quite where we want them. Now the best way to go and deal with these, if you've done it the way that I've done it, is to go and recolour these different bars and circles using the magic wand tool. So if we go down here to the magic wand tool, which is the fourth one down on the left hand side, and the magic wand tool is a magic thing because it selects by colour and it knows to go and take whole chunks of colour and not other colours. And then the way that you change how tolerant that it is by going to the top. So if it starts detecting maybe you want something that's black and grey as a whole, it will take all of that, but maybe not the dead white around it. But we've got nice clear solid colours like this red banner here. So if we go to the banner there, click on it, and once we've got the layer selected with the magic wand tool, it will definitely take it. I'll tell you why it will take it, because it needs a tolerance tool, but it's given a tolerance of 3. So we selected that one there. If we go and not select the banner, if we go and select the splash, click on the splash, then if we go to over here and we click on that blue of the splash, it will just take what it can see of that colour, right? So at the moment we don't want it to be that horrible blue. It's not that tasteful. We're going to go and get ourselves maybe a black. Let's go and get ourselves a black like so, and we've got a colour there, and then we're going to go to our paint bucket, and then we can drop it into that marquee. We can see the marching ants, they're in that kind of quarter circle, and we can drop that in and it will make it black for us. Dare I say that if I go and move that layer down just by clicking off it, let's go to the marquee tool, do a 0 point click, and then we're going to go to the move tool in the top left hand corner. I bet the rest of it is still blue. You see, it will only take what is visible within the canvas. So it's a bit of a risky strategy. Ideally you make your splashes and things the right colour that you want already. Alright, so we're going to pop that round there like so. I'll have to go and change my intriguing splash text to a smaller bit of smaller font size as well. Right, so we can change colours of things we've already placed on the page. Now the other way of doing this is by using the shape tool, and with the shape tool, if I just quickly show you that, the shape tool is about 2/3 the way down here, and if I grab that and go and make myself say a little strip like that, it will turn up at whatever colour I have there on the left hand side. Now what we can do is we can change that colour on the fly. So if I double click that and I want that to be, I don't know, an awkward pink, then it will change that afterwards. All right, so maybe using shape tools is another technique that you can use. Maybe a better technique. I tend to find it comes up with this little halo that I really hate around it, which is a bit odd. So I tend to use marking an area and then dropping colour in it. But if you are not sure about your colours, then you can always change it with your shape tools and then changing the colour of that afterwards. But for now, so let's go and change our colour at the top. In fact, you know what, I am going to do it with the shape tool just so you see how malleable that it is. I've got my banner down here in the bottom right hand corner. I've got my shape here. So let's go and delete the shape for now. And let's go down there and press Control, and that will give you that menu there. And we're going to go to Delete Layer. Marvellous. We're going to get rid of that one. And we're going to go and get our banner, and we're going to make it invisible. As we know it's there, but we're going to make out that we don't know it, that it exists. Then we're going to go to our rectangle tool, and we're going to go and select a colour. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the colour choices down the bottom left hand corner, and it always gives you a colour picker. You don't always have to go to the colour picker manually. It will ask you, well, do you want something else that's on the page? And what we'll do, I think we can go and take maybe that red colour again and see where we get with that. And what we can do sometimes is have like a slightly lighter version of it. So we're going to move it there to that kind of tan kind of colour there. That'll do for now. And then we can go and make ourselves a shape. Let's go and grab ourselves, we're going to make a rectangle. Now the rectangle I'm going to make is going to be slightly off of the masthead. That is to say that I don't want it sitting directly pixel to pixel on top of the masthead, and slightly off the sides of the canvas, and I won't see anything that isn't inside the bounds of the canvas. And that means that you can get things that are slightly bigger, a bit like we had with our splash, because there was a whole circle but we just turned it into a quarter circle, and make something that's a useful size that fits with the composition of our image. So let's go to the move there, and we're going to go off to something else. Now once we go and press our different layer, like our splash for example, because we need to move our splash up, you see how our splash has become all split up and just a little bit of black there, so we have to move our splash up, and then we're going to go and get our June 2020, and we're going to go, that's just about there. We're going to click on that, but guess what? We've got our cell lines in the way, so that's going to be problematic. Let's go and move our cell lines to one side. So we've still got, just about, you can see there the yellow June 2020 date line. You do need to have this date line or issue number in there. It is one of your NEA requirements. We're going to grab that up. We're going to go and put that in a nice clear black. Let's go and put that one there. That's fine. We could have used the red, but I'm going to go and stick that down near the barcode as well. So let's go and move that one down with our move tool. Let's go and stick it there, and you see how it's snapping there and just wants to go to the bottom or wants to go to the top. So I'll move it down, and then I'm just going to use my cursor keys to get it in line where I want to, so it doesn't really sort of mess with the hand too much, and it sits down with the barcode. At the moment the cell lines, I have moved them across, but now I feel like I need to move them slightly off because they're sort of fighting with the lines of her shirt, and we know obviously we will have to change where these go at some point, because we're going to put some proper text in there. But at the moment, I'm just showing you that you get these conventions, and they will be able to be laid out based on the size that they are. Right, and one final thing I'm going to go and do here before we finish up for today is we're going to go and get our intriguing splash text, and we're going to move that up ever so slightly. Now, it might be the case that we have to go and change the font size of it, but you'll notice throughout the whole piece I have been using this Tahoma font throughout the whole thing. And one of the things we will talk about when we talk about branding next time round is having really consistent limited sets of fonts and thinking about how one might use these. Now, this is no way a finished magazine cover, because at the moment there's nothing specific to fashion magazines here, but we do know that we have all of the conventions on there, and it's almost like if you can make yourself a template that sort of feels like you want it to feel, with a masthead that is sort of correctly branded as you see fit. Let's just go and move my enigmatic cell line. You see how I want to get a bit of a symmetry there between maybe my enigmatic cell line in the top left with an image to come in, the second one there in the middle maybe with an image to come in, and then my splash. So we're thinking about symmetries, we're thinking about using the space that the main cover image provides us with. So there we have it. We have the fashion magazine with all the conventions on. We have a masthead, we have a strap line that confirms the masthead, we have cell lines, we have a main cell line that goes against the main cover image, we have our date and our price against the barcode. That date should be monthly, by the way, unless the brief says it's weekly, but either way, I think normally actually weekly is the thing with the current affairs magazines, whereas fashion magazines tend to be monthly. And then we have our other cell lines around the top. Now this tends to be what a fashion magazine will look like. Hopefully you can see that you guys with Photoshop at home, if you follow this through, you will have a good basis for something where you know you're going to have all the right things on it, and once you get one magazine cover done, guess what? The second magazine cover is going to have the same branding. It's just that at the moment, if you've done this, you will have a really good almost template for you to get yourself started with. Now there is one very important thing. We might as well go and deal with it now. We need to think about how we are saving our work. Now you should be saving as you're going along. Certain programs like iMovie or Pro Tools, where there's lots of data flying around, will sort of auto save behind and there'll be backups. But you should always get into the habit of saving as you go, right? If you do a save, it will save it with the current file name. But if you go to File, Save As, then you can edit that file name. Now what we want to go and do here is we have so far had Trial Fashion Magazine, and I'm going to be calling this Trial Fashion Magazine Basic Temp. Right, it's a basic template. Yeah, I'm not finished with it yet, so I'm going to call it a basic template because I'm going to name it what it is. There you go, basic template. Name it what it is, be it a layer, be it a file. And I'm going to go and put that into my desktop. In fact, let's go and use this button here. This button here is terribly useful. It opens up on a Mac, but you'll see other buttons like it on a Windows computer. There will be something that opens up the full directory, and we need to go to Magazine, Home, Project, All, right, where we're keeping all our files. We can see our barcode, we can see our main cover image, and we're going to save this layered file, this Photoshop file, which keeps all the layer information, so that on your version of Photoshop you can go back and tweak this cell line and tweak this image. And we're going to go and save that first of all. Let's do a save, and that will keep all of the information, and it's ready to be edited again, right? Maximize compatibility, yes, and that's all good, right? Save your work as you go along. Save it now. Now, if you want to go and pump out a version of this as a flat JPEG or a PDF, again you have to do save as, because you're going to save it as a different file type. At the moment you probably won't need to show this to anyone, but it's worth me telling you so you know for the future. And you'll see in save as, it's going to take us back to our directory of where we've kept everything else, and we've got options. We have the Photoshop PDF, which tends to keep some of the layer information, but if another program opens up a PDF, it'll just see it as flat. But I always feel that sometimes you can get export problems, sometimes with PDFs, and JPEG tends to be a bit safer. I don't know why, maybe it's just a quirk of CS5, but I'm going to go to JPEG, and I'm going to go and make sure it's in my magazine home project all, and you'll see that it's just changed the file type there to JPG, and I'm going to go and save that. So that's going to get you started, and what I'd recommend, of course, is that you go back and scroll through different sections. I've put some header sections for each sort of topic I sort of cover, but hopefully you should be able to put something together using this.